Hi all, Rick here. And here I was, trying to put together a script for a smaller video for this weekend when the teaser drops for a new Star Trek game with Star Trek Shadow Frontier. This video is not sponsored, by the way, I just wanted to talk about it because, well, look at my channel. So, this eerie trailer shows Ro Laren speeding through the wreckage of a clearly Federation starship while creeping tentacles and growths pursue her, and a voiceover, apparently an old friend of hers, claims that they are slipping away into the darkness. The ship itself appears to be planet-side, judging by the atmosphere outside the windows, and with marginal power. A room has a malfunctioning artificial gravity inside, in which we can see a floating 3D chess set, a clear tea glass, a baseball, and a coffee mug, before a 2360s era Starfleet comm badge drifts into her palm. Of note, she is alone and not in Starfleet uniform, so I'll get to that in my analysis. The Steam store page reveals more about this game too, with the description showing that she has been lured to a planet on the edges of presumably Federation charted space. The planet she arrives on is one with multiple wrecks on it already, but more menacingly, a strange psychic presence that has subsumed the planet's ecosystem. Not only can it manipulate the environment and has warped the lifeforms of the planet to serve it, but it also has a powerful mind which seeks to break Ro Laren's psyche. The description includes elements of psychological horror hallucinations and forcing Ro to confront her past and the decisions she has made, which to me speaks to her choices around Starfleet. There is going to be a lot of investigation and mystery solving, usually hand in hand with survival horror genres, so it looks to be centred around sneaking, escaping, and mystery and puzzle solving. Of all the characters to be placed into a survival horror setting, Ro Laren is probably the best choice. She is defined by her willpower, tenacity, and has a proven history of self-reliance. With the game also focusing on psychological aspects and an exploration of her history, there's also plenty there to be drawn from. Her father was tortured to death in front of her by the Cardassians when she was only 7. She spent her childhood in the refugee camps created by the occupation of Bajor, notably Valo 2. She developed issues around feeling ashamed of being Bajoran, growing up and seeing her people in such a state, and she found herself fearful of seeming weak. Over time, these feelings left her, and she began to heavily embrace her Bajoran heritage, donning it proudly. And understandably, she never really left behind her hatred for the Cardassians. And that was just her childhood. She eventually found her way to Starfleet. Seeking purpose and possibly escape, she joined in 2358. However, her self-reliance and stubbornness led to her disobeying orders on the USS Wellington during an away mission to Garon 2. Her actions led to the deaths of 8 others, and she was court-martialed. She opted to refuse to defend her actions and was sent to the Jarrah Stockade, where she resided for a long while until Admiral Kennelly reinstated her to help track down a Bajoran terrorist. This is where we first meet her in the shows. She was standoffish and reserved, and many on the Enterprise felt unsure about her inclusion in Starfleet. Say what you will about the utopian ideals of the Federation, but it created an atmosphere where some people were looking down on Ro thanks to her perceived acts and imprisonment. Others were not so judgmental, but simply unsure as to how to approach, especially when rebuffed. Picard eventually understood her and saw her determination and grit, granting her a role on the Enterprise and effectively a second chance and a new purpose. A role she accepted, but would ultimately betray once more. She undertook Starfleet's Advanced Tactical Training Program, furthering her career, and even received a promotion to lieutenant. But then the Marquis happened. For the unaware, the Cardassian and Federation peace treaty necessitated the exchange of certain territories, and not all who were on worlds being handed over to the Cardassian Union wanted to leave. The Marquis was a splinter faction of former Federation and Starfleet colonists and sympathizers who turned militant in pushing back against the Cardassians, an organisation which the Federation was forced to denounce as terrorists to protect its treaty, and actively pursue. Ro Laren was the perfect agent to infiltrate the Maquis, thanks to having, frankly, a believable motivation. Unfortunately, despite the faith Picard had placed in her, abiding by her duty and the trust he had, she ultimately turned from Starfleet a second time in favour of following her morals in joining the Maquis against the Cardassians. For a long while, that was it. That was the end of her story in canon, although she would later reappear in Starfleet uniform 31 years later. It's during this gap that I think the game takes place, as it provides ample history and past decisions for her to grapple with. Her trauma from the occupation, her choice to join Starfleet and the subsequent deaths on her hands, which she clearly felt guilty for, having offered no defence in her trial. Then her betrayal of Picard's faith, not to mention the fact that the Maquis ultimately failed in their rebellion, being mostly wiped out by the Cardassians. By the time we see her in Star Trek Picard, we learn that she had, long ago, turned herself into Starfleet, and over those 3 decades had rebuilt her life and career, dedicating herself fully and finally to the Starfleet mission and a career in intelligence operations. So, we have a character with plenty of trauma and guilt over her life choices, but with resolve and determination to survive. She has mountains of experience forged from a terrible childhood, and advanced training, and an understanding of technology which would probably prove useful on a Starfleet wreck. But of equal importance, she has good memories to draw on too. I think that this experience will ultimately lead her to confront her past choices and result in her opting to return to Starfleet, turning herself in for closure and duty's sake. So, that's it. I am pretty excited to play this. I think it's rather hard to make a Star Trek game centred around the primary aspects of Starfleet, to be honest. Outside of puzzles, games tend to involve a lot of conflict, and Star Trek generally tries to minimise this in its settings. It's always the last resort. A survival horror game with psychological aspects may be dark, but it's an avenue beyond shooty action games. So I'm optimistic about it. Let's hope it manifests into a good experience. Plus, the near future looks to be brimming with sci-fi games I can't wait to try and will probably cover on this channel, including the upcoming Expanse Osiris Reborn and the new Alien Isolation, the first of which I have a playthrough here on the channel. There's also the Star Trek Infection, but not owning a VR we will have to see. Not to mention Exodus, which feels very Mass Effect coded and I really want to get my hands on. So, thanks for watching this look into the character of Ro Laren. I'm thinking I'll do a personnel file, but I also want to know when this game fits in before I do that. However, I'm kind of impatient at times, so I've been Rick. Thanks again, and goodbye.